Thank you. I know. Yeah. um, You know, it's wild. No matter how many workshops I do in front of large crowds, how nervous I still get in front of folks. So, um, let's get started then. Uh, Good morning to you all. You know, for joining us here today. For those of you here in person, it's really great to see all of you here. And also a big hello to all of those who are here virtually with us this morning. Special thanks to Regan Lindsay and Dr. Leslie Ann Brown Henderson. Um, you know, for sure, both of whom have helped me prepare for today by answering just a ton of my questions, so many emails. So appreciate that. My name is Dr. Syed Hill. I use he and him pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director of Prevention and Masculine Engagement at CARE, which is our Center for Awareness, Response, and Education, where we provide confidential support, education, and advocacy services for our student survivors and all students who have been directly and indirectly impacted by various forms of violence. I'm here today to provide the land acknowledgement this morning. Before I do that, I just wanted to mention just how wild of a year it's been, year plus it's actually been, and how grateful I am for all of my colleagues in student affairs. There's been so much heaviness in the air for a long time now, some directly related to our Northwestern community and other heaviness with even broader impact and global heaviness or global implications. During these times, I know we all need to love and support each other, and we all need love and support. And I hope, despite how fast things are constantly moving here in Northwestern, all of us are finding time to just slow down, feel, heal, and connect. Um, I've been so fortunate to work with CARE's director, Carrie Wachter. Yes, shout out to Carrie. Um, Carrie's leadership, genuineness, and loving spirit has helped not only keep CARE functioning as well as possible, but has certainly kept me functioning personally as well during these times. I know we have so many talented leaders in student affairs, but I just wanted to acknowledge just how much I really appreciate Carrie, and I'm so happy to be on the same team as her. It's also with that same love, humility, and gratitude that I help lead us in taking a moment to honor the land in which we as a Northwestern community sits. Before I pass it over to our Vice President, who will provide us uh, with a general outlook of how this morning will look and just talk us through that. To start this land acknowledgement, I'd also like to thank Cho Fogarty, a close colleague of mine and Assistant Director in Social Justice Education. Yeah, shout out to Cho. I don't know if Cho's here this morning, but shout out to Cho. She's a close colleague of mine and Assistant Director in Social Justice Education who partners with me on the bystander intervention programming here at Northwestern. Cho's thoughtfulness in providing our land acknowledgements before all of our joint programming has really touched me and has helped me craft this land acknowledgement today. This is the slide, right? Land acknowledgement, cool. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. Northwestern is a community of learners situated within a network of historical and contemporary relationships with Native American tribes, communities, parents, students, and alumni. It is also in close proximity to an urban Native American community in Chicago and near several tribes in the Midwest. As a division, we need to remember the strengths of our Native and Indigenous communities while also committing to the reconciliation and healing that needs to take place between our Northwestern community and these communities. We do this as a way to honor the original people of the land upon which Northwestern stands and the Native people who remain on this land today. In the spirit of healing, we acknowledge that the Northwestern campus sits on the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa, as well as the Menominee, Miami, and Ho-Chunk nations. It was also the site of trade, travel, gathering, and healing for more than a dozen other Native tribes, and is still home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois. Today, I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the increase in national awareness of many missing people and their families, and especially uplifting Black, Brown, and Indigenous people whose experience and stories continue to be underrepresented in mainstream news. We recognize and continue the continued plight of citizenship and safety. Currently, thousands of asylum-seeking Haitian migrants pursuing safety and refuge have experienced inhumane violence. Many are being held in holding camps and being sent back to Haiti on expulsion flights or to other countries. We do recognize that borders are artificially constructed to control and separate resources, including people, and the ways that our government has been complicit in the violation of human rights and dignity. I encourage everyone to reach out to their elected and local officials and also consider following updates from the Haitian Bridge Alliance to learn more. Thank you so much, and much love to all of you in here. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Julie Payne-Kirschmeyer, aka JPK.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everybody who's virtual too. If anybody wants to wave at the camera, they're behind you. Some of us they can see, some they can't, but that's okay. Just want to make sure everybody feels included and that they know whether you are logging in virtually or you were in the space with us today, we are all in community together. And it is a lovely thing to be part of. And so thank you so much for being here in whatever way you can. I think before we get started, I do also want to take a moment and thank Saeed. Thank you so much for grounding us in this space. Your thoughtfulness and intentionality behind what you just shared, and even the challenge that you gave to us, brings the work behind our land acknowledgements into a space of deeper learning and action. And I think that's critically important. So thank you so much for doing that. I also want to acknowledge, anybody read the shout outs as they were coming through, right? That I think is really fun. And so how many, Regan, we had how many? Over 100 that came through. And so just thank all of you for taking a moment to recognize each other. I know, as Saeed said in the very beginning, this has been a really difficult time. And the more that we can lift each other up, the better off I think we're going to be and how we're going to endure this together. So thank you so much for doing that. I feel a little bit like Norris Tech back there because I got old school tech and new school tech and something to control with. And if I get confused, I'm just going to say, Chris, help. And you got me, right? Good. And that was also my way of thanking Norris Tech. All of our friends in the back for constantly having our back, not just in situations like this, but with every Zoom webinar that we gave, these virtual trainings that you gave. They were there, and in partnership with SAIT, we're able to figure things out so we can continue to engage and connect with our students, and we'll continue to rely on them as we do more and more events together. I do want to make sure that folks know that we do have, and this is for people who are answering or asking questions, that we do have folks that are virtual and in the space. Just keep that in mind as we are here together today. And with that, let me see if I can get this to work, Chris. The moment of truth? No. Chris, thank you. So here's where we'll go today. We will start off with sharing again, and you saw this in the information we sent out, about our strategic plan foundational statements. We'll talk a little about return to campus, and many of these comments for return to campus and flexible work strategies and student advocacy and activism came straight from the questions that you all submitted to us. So thank you for doing that. It helped us frame the information that different members of SALT's leadership will share with you today. And then also at the end, we'll have a little time for some additional Q&A, both for folks in the room and folks who are here virtually. So if you have questions, please just make them write them down or keep mental notes of them, and we will do our best to answer them at the end. If you still have questions and you don't feel comfortable asking it in front of a big group of people, if you submit them behind the scenes, we will do our best to get back with you on those. And I'll stay here for as long as you need me to. And you can come up and ask me individual questions as well. So just want to make sure everybody knows all of their options. And then some announcements at the end. So I always reserve the right to give a few opening remarks at the beginning. I'm doing my best to keep it on time, Leslie Ann, so that we get through this because I know better. She's not looking at me funny yet, so we're okay. So Chris, if you could advance. I know this is a weird slide to start with, but I am going to share with you a moment of vulnerability that even up until last night, I was struggling with what to say, right? You think about our traditional fall breakfast event or a fall kickoff event. And it's usually filled with energy and excitement. And I feel that in the room today. But we cannot ignore everything that Saeed said at the very beginning, right? There's so much stuff going on that is heavy and hard, and it's all mixed together. So we could have started with all these great pictures of things that have happened over the past 3 weeks. We could have started with, not just the shout outs to everybody on the screen, but sharing all the great work that you do. And we're going to do that too. But I didn't want to start in that space and ignore, because I have a feeling that many of you are feeling similarly to where I am right now. Chris, if you could advance. And this tweet summed it up for me. That's where I'm sitting. Trying to heal while trying to grieve, while trying to live, while trying to dream, while trying to smile, while trying to give love, while trying to be love. And I think about that in its totality. And I see folks nodding a little bit with that and sort of sitting with it, right? And I see in all of this sort of the work we're called to do in student affairs, right? I see in all of this the humanity with which we need to center each other and ourselves. I see in all of this the search for joy and in parallel with finding moments of critical hope that we have talked about in the past. And I see all of it being centered in love, and we're trying to do that while being in this really heavy space. And so like I said, I didn't just want to start in that weird grounded space of, yay, it's a great kickoff to fall. And it is. And again, we will talk about that. But the acknowledgement is too critical. And so when I get in these spaces, I keep thinking about, our favorite phrase from global marketing, and this is no disrespect for our global marketing colleagues in Northwestern. The and is in our DNA. And it feels like we have been asked to do and for the past 18 to 20 months, both professionally and personally, right? And we have done everything we can, I think, to level set with each other that there are times we have to step away, not just for health reasons. It could be just for spiritual, mental reasons, because there's a lot of heaviness around, racial equity and social justice issues, around political divisiveness, about xenophobia, or about the global health pandemic, all of it sort of coming together, our own fears, our own insecurities, our students' fears, our students' insecurities, right? And I keep coming back to a phrase that is used a lot, and this may seem a little strange, in improv work, and that's the yes and, right? And I say the yes and like this, not the yes and as in and. I don't want anybody to walk away from this session with thinking that I am saying you're going to say yes to everything that we ask and then go do more. The yes and to me is a lot more about getting to a yes that works for you and that works for all of us and that works for our students. And that involves oftentimes deep conversations and being vulnerable with supervisors, with each other, with students in ways that maybe we haven't had to be before. And holding that space for yourself and really dialoguing with people and getting to a place where we can, I think, Brent, you say this a lot, right? Where we can get to yes. I know Kelly does. We can get to yes, but the yes may look different than where we started. And all of the care that needs to go along with that process. So as we look ahead and actualizing our strategic plan and all of the things around this continued return to campus and reactivation and navigating all of the issues that we've talked about, think about the yes and in that way. And I hope that what you see is that it does center care, and it does center love, and it does center wellness, and it does center justice in very different ways. And as I look ahead in that space, I can then again see the joy in a different way. So Chris, if you can just start knocking these out. Yep, this brings me joy. And not just because it's a cool picture taken with a drone, right? It's the excitement and love and the intentionality behind which all of you came together to ensure that our class of 2025 and transfers got a good start and an exciting start. And you rethought stuff in different ways. Go ahead and advance for me. Yep. So, I mean, this was hilarious. Thank God I did not sing. No one needed to see me do that. Ron and Mona tried to get me to do it. I didn't do it. I'll sing for you later. Not there. But the students were having so much fun here. Go ahead and advance. We see it in the silent disco. Mona is the absolute best silent disco dancing partner on the planet. If you don't believe me, she will demonstrate later. Go ahead and advance. I mean, students were just having so much fun and they were doing it safely. Remember, they all got arrival tested, right? We knew where they stood. They took care of themselves before they came. And because of all of that, we were able to have these moments. Go ahead and advance. And this brings me joy. This was the restart. This is when we got to bring our class of 2024 and returning transfers back to say, you missed some stuff and we want to be here for you to give it back. And that required an entirely different set of rethinking and reevaluating and a cross-divisional team and some university partners coming together to make sure we got the class photo, the March Through the Arch. Go ahead and advance, Chris. There they are. That's actually the class of 2024. I checked. Jill gave me access to SmugMug. Thank you, Jill. That was helpful. And the excitement and joy that they had when they were there was palpable. And the parents who were there with them saying, thank you for bringing this back. Go ahead and advance. You know, and then new traditions like Rock the Lake. I mean, the best name ever for Northwestern, right? Rock, Lake, whole thing, right? Student performances. They were so excited. We had, I think, and I realize I do crowd estimates probably different than the day late. Don't you dare tell them I said that. That there were easily over 1,000 people sitting on that lawn, watching these performances, getting excited about the performances. The student orgs that were stepping up were excited to be able to present. And that energy came back to campus. But every single decision we made, everything we did from that frame of yes and. And that is what brings me hope. And I hope it brings you hope. I hope it brings you a level of joy. And I hope you all know that I know that every single one of you have a role in making this happen. And so thank you for that on behalf of our students, on behalf of our Northwestern community. I just want to say thank you in that space. Go ahead and advance for me. Yep. And I love this too, right? Because our students stepped in and were partners in this whole process. RAs and PAs and family ambassadors and student employees, right? We had some of our folks in key areas that are, helping with the desks. They are helping with, the MSA reception was amazing. We had students stepping in to help in that space too. They wanted to make sure that our students had that experience and that our campus had that experience as well. Go ahead and advance. And with that, I do want to acknowledge some areas. All of you did amazing work, but I think about what we've just been through and not just the start of the year, but this entire time. And there were folks that I think all of you made such a difference with our students, but we couldn't have done the work that we did if we didn't have them. I want to acknowledge our colleagues in SAIT. If you want to, you don't have to stand. I know that's not your jam, but if you want to wave, please do. There's a bunch of them here. Scott's in the corner, right? The pivots that we made, the continued support that we've needed, there is no way we could have done without them. The advice and counsel they've given along the way so that we could still be successful in a fully remote, then a hybrid, and then now this kind of hybrid-ish, I don't know what we call it anymore, environment was phenomenal. The Norris University Center team. Yep. A lot of you in the back, some of you kind of in through here. You kept a space open when it was most definitely needed. And the elements of community that were put in place here and that kept you embraced and continue to embrace were nothing short of amazing. Where's our the entire student engagement team plus campus inclusion and community, because we had a transition in there. If you all want to wait, yeah. How you rethought every element of campus engagement, creating those meaningful student experiences was phenomenal for students. They kept engaged, connected from, there were partnerships with Norris, there were partnerships with Res Services, and it was a lovely thing to bear witness to, and that's why we are where we are now. Our CAPS colleagues, I know you're in here, I saw some of you, yep, around, I know there's some of you up there. The pivot to virtual mental health, expanding services, really trying to figure out how you navigate mental health in a time like this is just a tremendous weight. And you continue to move through it. And we know we're going to see these lagging effects, but you're coming up with different and meaningful ways in which we can get those services to our students. Our health promotion and wellness team. I know you're here. I saw you. Okay. The expanded coaching that you did around wellness, I think about how many graduate students you reached. That's phenomenal to me. Our career advancement folks, I mean, the employment numbers alone, Mark could give you like a 2-hour presentation on how our employment numbers and the support our students felt were just tremendous. So thank you for that. Our Dean of Students team, there are days I don't know how you're standing. Everybody from Accessible NU to, our SAS team, our community standards team, the folks that really provide the infrastructure in and around community standards, the connection with off campus, being out there with Mona and making sure, we're going to hand out some of this stuff, right? And off campus folks, please behave. That's great. We like that lesson. It's really helpful. And then a whole, our residential services team, right? You provided shelter, and not just shelter, but you provided a home. And at one point for students who had no home to go to. And I hope you know how meaningful that is. And all the way through, our maintenance tech team who were there every single day, making sure those spaces were clean and safe, to our Res Life team who were in the spaces with those students. We couldn't have done it without you. There's no way. Our dining team and our dining partners. Stacy, Jim, I promise we won't make you pivot dining. I hope not ever again when you had to replan it like 8 times in a day, I think. And then in a pandemic, we have to thank profusely our student health services partners. The advice, the counsel, the direction, the connection with public health, the connection with testing, the care they gave to people. It just blows my mind in a number of different ways. And, when I think about care, I also think about care. And that team, small but mighty that you are, right? And how you had to step up in so many different ways and how overwhelmed you were, and yet our students were cared for. I mean, we have our assessment team. Hi, Rob. And Amy. I know you're there, Amy, right? The dynamic duo. Our HR team, Irene, I think you might have been it for a while, right? Our marketing partners, our business and finance team, and Anne, the small but mighty special project staff. There she is, right? And finally, I absolutely want to mention our commencement planning team. Not only did we do 2 events at the beginning of this year, we did, I don't know how many events at the end of last year. So Kelly, Jeremy, Liza, Anne, Irene, so many others that leaned in and stepped in to make sure that went off without a hitch. Thank you. Yeah, I'm over Leslie Ann, sorry about that. But it was important to me to express gratitude. Please know if I didn't get down to the granular, you are no less meaningful and important to me. But I so appreciate everything that you've done and continue to do on behalf of our students and on behalf of each other. So I will now call up Leslie Ann Brown Henderson, our Assistant Vice President for Inclusion and Chief of Staff. Not going to fall back to stage.
Good morning, everyone. So we're going to switch gears really quickly, but it's really with the spirit of gratitude continued. And myself and Julie and Rob Aaron are going to talk a little bit about the strategic planning process and next steps. Before we get right into it, just as a reminder, we will have a Q&A section at the very end of the program today. So those of you who are virtual, please submit your questions via the chat function or Q&A function, and we are collecting those and we'll respond to them. And then we'll have some live Q&A in this space as well. So if you all can hold your questions, remember them, write them down. We want to make sure that we respond to them. Also, it is no secret, I am fairly pregnant and gasping for air. So you all just bear with me here. All right. So I just want to say thank you all on behalf of myself and Rob Aaron for really engaging with us in the strategic planning process. We were asked by our vice president and really charged with coming up with a process that was inclusive, one in which that you all could have multiple feedback loops to give us feedback on the process and end up at a place where we could feel good as a division, where everyone could see themselves, find themselves in the plan somewhere. So I'm just going to go through a review of what that process was. So we started off with a kickoff in late March, and the snapshot, and it started with a survey that was sent out to all of our staff across the division, asking you all to give some feedback on the current plan. So the plan that we've had for about 9 years as a division. So it was time for us to revisit that together. After that, at the spring gathering, we kind of launched the strategic planning process and discussed it together, what it would look like. There were some remote interviews that took place with our review team. We partnered with NASPA Advisory Services, which we had some external reviewers work with us to help collect feedback and collect your thoughts. Then they went together and wrote a report, and we started with our strategic planning retreats. We had 2 half-day retreats with a smaller group of people, about 25 of us met. And then there were feedback loops for you all. So we brought back information. Of course, the process wasn't perfect. We weren't aiming for perfection, but we were aiming for progress as well as insights from you all, and multiple times that you all could give us feedback. All the draft documents were sent to you all after that, and that was intentional. So we wanted it to be as transparent as possible. All of those documents live on the website as well, so you can always go back and look and see what feedback or what other information was provided. We had a summer essay council meeting, which we hadn't had in the past, but we thought it was a great opportunity for us to get some feedback from the essay council group that they garnered from their teams. And then if you go to the next slide, we had another half day, the last half day strategic planning retreat, and then SALT went to work on this. So we were provided with drafts of all of our foundational statements, and then SALT went on a 2-day retreat, and much of that time was spent reworking those, thinking about those, thinking about how they aligned. We sought feedback from our teams as well, so we brought your voices in the space. And there were multiple times I can tell you that people said, oh, I remember Angela saying this in this meeting, or I remember Carrie saying this, or Paul saying this, right? So it wasn't only our voices that we were reflecting on, but we were really bringing the voices of our teams into the space. After the retreat, Julie did some vetting, both to kind of bring some of the senior leaders up to speed as to where we were, but also to say, how does this read to you? What questions might you have? So not asking permission, but certainly saying, how do you connect? How do you see your unit, Provost Haggerty, connecting with student affairs through this plan? Finally, we went back to work as SALT on the plan. We did some work on strategic themes and then some of the values work. And then it was released to the full division on August 23rd. And what we've asked was, between the date of the release until the breakfast, that you all just spend some time familiarizing yourself with it and seeing how your units can feel like you're connected. Where do you see yourselves? What questions do you have? How does it feel to kind of try it on as a staff, as a team, as a division? So that's where we are today. And I'm going to bring Julie back up, ask Julie to come back to go through the foundational statements. And then my partner here, Rob Aaron, is going to talk through what our next steps are. So thank you.
So none of this should be new to you folks, because we sent it out to you pretty much right as I was vetting. And I think, Leslie Ann, I appreciate you contextualizing it in the way of when those conversations with other senior leaders were happening. This wasn't a permission asking moment. It really was familiarized connection and anything that we need to be thinking about. And I will say that with the deans, the VPs, the provost, the president, and folks, when I shared this vision statement, building just, healthy, and meaningful student learning experiences, nobody blinked. They said, absolutely. That when we think about it from this perspective, it's an active, remember, the vision is the one that we're constantly striving for, right? Building is an action, and it's a forward-looking word. It also, quite frankly, pays a special nod to the folks who navigate the infrastructure pieces of the work that we do here. Building is intentionally used. Just, we root it in justice, equity, and inclusion. We see that mirrored in a strategic theme later on. They are healthy. And we know that when we talk about the definition of healthy, it has many, many different meanings to many, many different people. But if we're trying to build these, and this is a vision statement, then this is what we would want to achieve at some point. We're going to constantly strive for those healthy experiences and meaningful ones. And so I think you saw in the description about why we chose meaningful, not just purposeful, not just intentional. If the end goal here is that we want students to make meaning out of these experiences and they're important to them, then it's just healthy and meaningful. And then we kept these student learning experiences for the direct tie to the concept and the fact that what we say in student affairs is that we teach people and people learn. And we don't just impart it, we do it together. And so that is the thought behind our vision statement. Go ahead. Our mission statement: student affairs cultivates student programs, services, and skills, disrupts barriers, and partners across Northwestern and neighboring communities to create a culture in which all students can thrive. The mission is the what, right? It's not the what as in goal one, objective A, B, and C, but it's the big what for the division. And what do? We cultivate. That implies agency. Dav as a gardener knows you can't stick something in the ground and go grow and then stare at it. That doesn't work, right? So we have agency, we have partnership, we have connections, we have work that we need to do in the space to cultivate, and so do the students themselves. So if we cultivate programs, services, and skills, right, you can see how the different dynamics and components of student growth and development can come to life. We talked intentionally about disrupting barriers, and we stopped with barriers. We didn't say barriers to access, to learning, to promotion, to retention. It was barriers because the call was broad and we needed to name it. That there are barriers that we can look at externally and disrupt them, and disrupt in the most positive sense of the word. People automatically go to a negative space when we talk about disruption. That's not true. Think about it from the frame of research. Think about it from the frame of discovery. When you have a positive disruption in something, you have changed it. You have fundamentally changed it, and that's what we want to do. And we also know we can't do it alone, so we can disrupt it. Sometimes that's as simple as naming it. Sometimes that's collaborating with another unit to figure out a solution, right? And sometimes it's a barrier within our own division, and we have to name it, and we have to address it, and we have to work on it. And then partners across Northwestern and neighboring communities, that is the call to the connections that we have. Across Northwestern is every component that we have at Northwestern, but we also have neighboring communities in Evanston, in Chicago, in Miami, in San Francisco, globally, right? We have alumni who are neighbors in a different sense. And we need to make sure that these are the partnerships that we are really working through so we can do what? Create a culture, to what end? In which all students can thrive, and all students is used intentionally as well. We don't just focus on undergraduate students here. We don't just focus on a subset of undergraduate students. All students, undergraduate, graduate, professional, our part-time SPS folks, some of the folks who are predominantly online. I mean, these are the groups that we work with and we see them. Go ahead. Our strategic themes, we broke this into 4. There are 3 that are very external and 1 that is much more internal for us, right? So we champion holistic well-being. Champion was important to us because champion isn't just about winning, right? It really is an active word, and that we are constantly out there championing for this, that it's more than just advocating. It's also the work that we put into that as well. So we advocate for and cultivate, there's that word again. Healthy conditions, we're gonna have to define it, we know it. With cultural humility and cultural responsiveness. If we truly believe in equity and social justice, the work that we do through holistic well-being in this work has to be rooted in those tenets, in which all community members can thrive. And we didn't say students here because we knew this work also has to be done for our division and potentially for some partners outside of our division that we would help as well. Foster meaningful student engagement. No dean, by the way, all 4 of these, none of the deans balked at either. They're like, oh, okay. Yep, that makes sense to me. But creating intentional opportunities and conditions for purposeful student growth. Yeah, we can create things, right? And we can co-create things, and they are intentional, but they're opportunities, which means there's student agency involved in that process again. They're opting in some way. Sometimes we encourage them to opt in a little bit, but those conditions as well. So now we're talking about an environment. You know, I think about Norris and the way that we've changed things in this space. That's creating a condition. I think about online, and not just the Zoom rooms, but also the website and that navigation. That's creating a condition. And so I think it's important we see those words beyond, oh, we made a program or we renovated a space, right? It really is rethinking what those conditions could be. Okay. Here's the internal one: invest in organizational development. This was really important to us. Invest is an action word. It also is ongoing. Before we had cultivate organizational health, right? So there's agency, there's back and forth, but the way that it was written, it almost felt a little bit like a checkbox. Oh, we cultivated it, it grew, neat, we've got it now, and we moved on. We feel very strongly that now, and this is coming straight out of the things that you were telling us, which was so helpful, that we're investing in organizational development, so committing time and effort along with human and fiscal resources to nurture a thriving division. When we are good, we can do so much better for our students, right? And that's what we want to do with this theme. And then the fourth is to pursue equity, justice, and belonging. That word pursue was used so intentionally because it's constant, right? When you pursue something, nobody here that's a Title IX expert, please get mad at me, but we can pursue this. This is not against the law, right? But we want to pursue, we're working toward collective liberation. That word can, or that phrase can kind of freak people out a little bit. Let's be real. You say collective liberation, what does that mean? Let's break it down. Collective, together, liberation, to be free. My liberation is tied to yours, yours is tied to mine. My equity is tied to yours, yours is tied to mine. If we are working toward collective liberation through these things of acknowledgement, accountability, and sustainable change that honors the dignity of all, then we're centering our equity, inclusion, and belonging work in the right frame. Next one. Our 5 values and behaviors, we heard you. We didn't just want to say behave this way, or we had values and guiding principles that nobody could understand or remember, right? Is we lead with compassion, we model responsibility, we embrace well-being, we learn through discovery, and we engage in collaboration. And on the website, when you look, there are examples of what that looks like, because that tends to be far more meaningful and easier to understand, and it helps us be more fluid. We may come up with another descriptor about what it means or looks like to embrace well-being. We can add that in at a later point. So I think with that, I turn this over to you, Rob, correct? So Rob Aaron, our Executive Director of Student Affairs, Assessment, and Planning. We'll talk about next steps.
Thanks, Julie. So I will be very brief. We've got 2 overarching next steps. By the way, it is so great to see everybody in person. Hi, oh my gosh. Okay, I had to say that. Sorry, moving on. Let's go to the next slide, thanks. So 2 major next steps involved to kind of bring this plan into action, because whenever we look at a strategic plan, it's very forward thinking, it's very bold. I love this plan. I think it's going to be so effective for the work that we do. So now we need to figure out, how do we kind of bring it into action? So the first step is the development of a dashboard. You've already contributed data to this dashboard, folks, because you have somehow contributed to your area's annual report that you turned in earlier this summer. So Amy Huntington, hello, Amy. Thank you, yes, thank you. Amy and I are working hard to combine these data sources together into a dashboard. So kind of like when you're driving a car and you don't need to stick your head into the gas tank to see how much gas there is at a moment's notice, or you know how fast you're going, you don't have to stick your head out the window. You know what I mean? You have all these things right in front of you. So it's a whole bunch of different data sources that we're going to compile based on your annual reports, based on existing survey data, some other themes that we've gathered qualitatively to kind of represent the present state. Remember those metrics that a lot of y'all were working on last year? These are all coming together now. Very exciting. They're going to be organized by these components of the strategic plan, especially the strategic themes that Julie just mentioned. The purpose, though, is to be able to ultimately talk about where we are now and then where we've gone and what these trends look like over time. It's your information in action. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so before I talk about the next step after the dashboard, I need to clarify a few terms, because there is more than one way to name these terms. Julie's talked about the strategic themes, mission, vision, values, and behaviors, and then strategic themes is kind of these bigger picture areas under which we will, collect these other components of what are we doing in the future. And it's these other components where I will need your help. But let's first define terms. Strategic themes at the high level. Our destination here is to develop goals that are smart. They are dressed in a snappy, smart way, like me. No, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, SMART goals. You've probably heard that lingo at some other point. It's our way to measure progress. But before we can get to a level that's that granular, we need to develop a set of objectives kind of in the mid-level. to break each of these themes down a little bit further before we take the step to write these SMART goals. The term goals is very intentional because goals is the term that's used at the president's cabinet level for, Julie needs to report what are the division's goals every year. So we're very specific about calling the SMART measurable thing here in this plan our goals to match the other language. Make sense? We got the terms. Thank you for the nods of heads. I appreciate it. Next slide, Chris. Thank you. Last one, I promise. So now we're going to be creating objectives, and this is where I need your help. Student Affairs Council members, and don't worry, you don't have to remember these dates. There will be no quiz. I will send this out to Student Affairs Council after we're done. But I'm asking the members of Student Affairs Council to work with your teams to develop 1 or 2 objectives, not goals, not the SMART measurable thing, not the big strategic theme, but something in the middle, 1 or 2 per each of the strategic themes before our meeting on November the 1st. Thank you. The point here is to, again, help us break this down. Give us some basic data that we can work with from each of your areas about how your area would map into these strategic themes. Okay, so it's a chance to bring your department into this strategic plan. What we're going to do in Student Affairs Council is look at all of these themes that are brought in. Amy and I have a lot of analysis to do before then. We're going to look at all these different these objectives. I'm getting the terms wrong myself. We're going to look at all the objectives, try to whittle them up, and share them with the Student Affairs Council, who is going to process them further. Okay. In the middle of November, this is new. I want to bring together the alumni of Student Affairs Assessment Group. Over the years, it may have been called Student Learning Working Group. I'm seeing Jason in the back. Hi, a lot of people in the room have been through our assessment program here to help us analyze the data. Again, make sure that we're not missing anything. Make sure that if Amy and I are coordinating things, that we're not just doing this from our own lived experience, we're getting many other perspectives on there. It's a validity check of our work, so that then we can bring it to SALT for its retreat at the beginning of December, who will further process these objectives to be able to have something done by the end of the year. Then we'll go into SMART goals in January. More coming soon. That's all I have for now. I am pleased to introduce my colleague, Jeremy Schenk, Associate VP.
Thanks, Rob, and good morning. We'll go ahead to, in the speed of time, we'll move forward. Great, thanks. So I'm going to address some of the questions that were submitted regarding the university and division's return to campus and alternative work strategies plan. So as you all are aware, the university did implement a vaccination requirement this year. And over 97.5% of our students have been vaccinated, which is just a really great number. And of that 2.5%, the vast majority of those individuals have an access exception, which means that they did not have access to the vaccination, so they're getting it while here on campus now. So these numbers are great. When we look at, we also now have the masking requirement on campus, and thank you all for wearing your mask right now. But with the masking piece and the vaccination requirement, we've had a really great start to the year. In fact, over the last 7 days, the university's administered 10,200 tests, and we had a 0.5% positivity rate, which is just fantastic when you look at all of the startup activity for the year. So current guidelines for meetings and events have no real capacity restrictions right now, with the exception of the indoor mask requirement. We're also continuing with testing. For those who have a vaccination exception, they're required to test on campus twice a week. But all of you are able to participate in testing, and you're able to do that both in here at Jacobs Center in Evanston or at the 345 East Superior in Chicago. We also, through a partnership with risk management, we're able to solicit and get at-home tests for all of you. I've heard from many of you already saying the appreciation you had to be able to have those at-home tests. I know I and my family have used those as well. And so huge thank you to risk management for that partnership to make that possible for us. And we continue to work with procurement on all of our PPE. And so, and they continue, I was going to say the payment protection plan, the PPP, but no, PPE. So, once again, huge thanks to Jim Conrad and the whole procurement team who's been centralizing the PPE program for the university. And you are able to continue to work through procurement to solicit that PPE. All right, next slide. Just want to remind everyone of the student affairs 5 guiding principles for our return to campus. One was centering the needs of our students, and we're still really even determining what are those needs. For so many of these students as they're coming back to this campus or starting here, they're not even sure yet, and we're not sure. So as we continue to center those needs, it's really about figuring out what they are as well. Center the equity and care for our staff. Leverage what we've learned in operating in a semi-remote environment. Be innovative in our approach and look at technology. This, for instance, right now, we're using technology to deliver this hybrid event. There was an investment made from the university to put in the technology here in the Lewis room to do that type of an event. So leveraging that, what we've learned to really position ourselves to provide those experiences. And then position the plan in alignment with COVID safety. So knowing all of that, every department and every role within the department is different. And as we return to campus, we know that return has been different, especially for caregivers and BIPOC staff who've been more heavily impacted by the pandemic. So we're encouraging student affairs staff and supervisors to collaborate on alternative work strategies. And we're gonna go ahead and move to the next slide for that. So many of you know that pre-COVID, we actually already started to roll out this plan. It was called a flexible work arrangement plan at that point for the division. And we're looking at these different approaches. And now the university's released their alternative work strategy policy. This policy establishes that common ongoing framework, allowing our schools and units to implement strategies including flex time, alternative work schedules, seasonal arrangements, and limited remote days. These strategies must balance both the operational needs of the unit and the unique needs of the position with the individual and unique needs of the staff member. I want to say a huge thank you to Kendra Oyer, our new Director of Student Affairs Human Resources. Kendra, can you stand up? There she is. Kendra really has helped navigate that process for us, adjusting our flexible work arrangements to move to this new alternative work strategies, and has been a great tool and resource for all of you. So thank you, Kendra, for that. I'd now like to go ahead and turn this over to Mona Dugo and Kelly Schaefer.
Good morning. I was going to show off my silent disco skills, but I've been told we don't have much time, so we're just going to move forward. Go ahead.
Hi, all. My name's Kelly Schaefer. I use she, her pronouns. Hi to everybody in the virtual world. Welcome. Really quickly about student activism and advocacy. Well, the thing that I'd like to do with the next slide, please, is to show you the bottom talking point. We're a little pressed for time, so I have a lot to say about this topic and invite anyone who wants to talk with me about this topic. We've got a lot that's happening, but leave it to say that we've got the Community Safety Advisory Board, and there was a post on the 1st, and there's a chance to respond. So go ahead and read that if you're interested in this topic in particular and offer us some feedback.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. And I'm Mona Dugo. I use she, her pronouns. I guess I didn't introduce myself. If you could advance the slide, I'd appreciate that. So, one of the things that I just wanted to highlight, and I'm just going to take a minute to say that we are really working this year intentionally to try to decouple some of the mental health issues on campus with police response. And obviously our community has really asked for that, and we are trying to respond thoughtfully and intentionally. Because of that, we're living in a little bit of gray this fall. So we're trying out and we're beta testing some new protocols. I want to say that our residential team, our administrators on call, the dean on student staff, CAPS, anybody who serves on call has been working very closely with our police to try to figure out new protocols and new ways of operating. And so we're beta testing this fall, and so far so good. We during the pandemic, we had shifted the way we do wellness checks, so we really don't involve the police in that unless we would call 911 if we have imminent concerns about somebody. We think there's an emergency response needed. CAPS has been working and to figure out a way, and has a private ambulance service now that will transport students to the emergency room from CAPS, so they don't have to go with police escort in the back of a police car. We have figured out ways to bring students back from the ER to campus without police involvement. And generally, we're talking through protocols. So when we have a student that we're living in the gray with and we're trying to figure out new ways, there's a lot of collaboration happening among the folks on the ground to think creatively about how we do this differently. And I think, we've been doing a pretty good job of it. This really started, before this year. And so, but having students back on campus really allows us to test out our systems in ways that are new for us all. And one of the things we're doing is Garrett Gilmer and I, who is the director of CAPS, if you haven't met Garrett yet, and I co-led a committee that worked on decoupling mental health from police response. And one of the things we've submitted to CSAB, the Community Safety Advisory Board, is a plan to have some mental health folks on the ground who can do crisis work and do evaluations in students' places as opposed to setting police. So that's sort of in the works and something we're hoping that we'll get some traction, but as you can imagine, is very hard to work out. So, but we are really trying. We're putting in a lot of effort on this. And if you could advance the slide for me. And then the other thing I just want to speak to, because I know there were a lot of questions about this, is student activism. Our students are really ripe with activism right now. The moment calls for it. And as student affairs, we always want to center students' freedom of speech in that. So we want to create space for students to demonstrate and to use their voices to speak up and to make some change. And so we support that as student affairs. We have a group called the EST, which is the Event Support Team. If anybody's interested in joining, we're always looking for new members. And what we do is when we know of a student protest, we try to engage the students ahead of time and have a conversation with them. We want to make sure that students are safe while they're protesting, which is really important to us. And we have now brought in members from outside of student affairs to help with this because our students are very active. And so we've got folks from the provost's office and other areas who are now stepping up to help us. And the goal of that is really just to allow for peaceful demonstration and protest for our students and to support them and to get engaged and get in dialogue with them about some of the ideas that they have. Yeah, please.
And just adding one more thing too, in all the conversations that we're having as a campus and with all of our stakeholders, the piece that I know that we come from is this idea of from crucial conversations. The stakes are high, opinions differ, but we've got this common ground piece that I've been talking with stakeholders about, is that at the bottom line is we care about our students and we're in this to do this work for our students. And that is a great place to start a conversation, all the conversations that we've been having.
I think that's it for us. Thank you.
All right, so for the remaining few moments we have, I think this is the open Q&A. If folks have questions, if I can't answer them, I got a whole group of folks up here who can, or somebody else with the knowledge can. We've got, I think, microphone rovers. Hi, Kim, thank you. And Jason, Kim and Jason, amazing. Thank you, thank you.
All right, we're going to start with a virtual question.
Cool.
This is Leslie Ann Brown Henderson. I'm asking them from my seat. But the first question has to do with COVID recommendations. So what are the COVID recommendations for student groups serving food indoors?
That is a great question to which I will be vulnerable. I do not know the answer other than to say follow the guidelines, but I think somebody up here in the front row, Jeremy Shank, probably does.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so at this point, a lot of those guidelines evolve with where we're at with the public health guidelines in that time. So at this moment right now, there are no restrictions on the catering side. Although we still encourage, and our catering team here on campus has demonstrated for those who are here, we're able to see with breakfast today, are still able to provide the options where students can come and just take an item to go. So, so I think with that, their catering is open, but they are also willing to work with and create however safe you want to make that. So, but that changes as the guidelines change. And so right now, today, this is where we're at, that there are no restrictions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Jill has a question and she's in the front row and raised her hand very nicely. Thank you, Jill.
And my question's for like you 3 feet from me. The EST group, I'm just curious if it's just about events or also does it cover something like social media or communications that are going out from these student activists?
Thanks, Jill.
Just so folks need to know, that was Jill Norton over here. So go ahead.
And this is Kelly again. From EST, it did start as an event support team. It did start with the in-person kinds of events. I think what we're finding now is that we're reaching out with our partners across the Office of Global Marketing and Communication. And then also there are many of us in this room who monitor lots of social media, and that comes to our leadership levels so that we can respond appropriately. When we put together EST on Sunday, we did learn about the demonstration online. And that was not something, we tried to get ahead of that, as Mona said. That wasn't something that we were able to do. And so we showed up on site with our team and introduced ourselves to students in that sense and monitored social media with our partners. Does that answer?
Yep. Okay. And I think the thing I'll add about EST is I think originally when it started, we wrapped ourselves around, as often happens in student affairs. We've talked about this a lot before, like we will sort of pilot something and we take full responsibility for it, when really what we need to do is to do that partnering that we talk about across multiple different units across campus, because a demonstration isn't just a student thing, right? It's a university thing. And so as Kelly said so beautifully earlier, we're there for our students to be in the space, to work with them, to help them understand sort of what those parameters may be for them. And global marketing takes on a lot about the communication. And, so you can start to see, our safety and security team are working in different ways, that everybody has a different role here, all with the foundation being that we are supporting freedom of expression and the right for folks to protest. So.
And in the vein of, oh, I wish I would have said that also, I want to recognize Jill's expertise in the social media realm.
Mhm.
And if this is something that we need to cultivate and understand as EST, there are many of you also who are in these social media spaces. And so I think that that's something, to your question, Jill, we'd want to bring back to EST leadership to talk about how we respond in those ways too.
That's a great point.
All right, I have another virtual question, and this one is for Mona. So it's a follow-up to the wellness checks question, Mona. It says, you mentioned that NUPD will no longer be doing wellness checks unless we are contacting 911 for imminent danger. Who will be handling wellness checks during the interim?
Yeah, that's a great question. In some ways, I hope we're all kind of participating in wellness checks. So what we're doing when we get a concern in the Dean of Students office for a wellness check is we take a couple steps. So first we slow down and we gather more information, where that's really part of de-escalation right now. In the Dean of Students office, we call, text, and email students to try to get a hold of them, to get them in conversation. One of the things I would say is Zoom has made that a little more efficient in some ways, because instead of trying to get a student to walk into your office, you can pull them into a Zoom quick check-in pretty easily. Sorry, my glasses are really fogging up. And then if we don't get a hold of a student, what we're doing is we're contacting emergency contact now. And as opposed to asking the police to check in on somebody. In the past, I would say 18 months or something, I can now think of 3 instances where we've consulted with the police about a situation. So we are in consultation with the police sometimes to see if we've met a threshold and if we need to consider a 911 kind of check on them. But the Dean of Students office and Res Life have been really in the business of doing wellness checks in droves for years. So I think like in an average year in the Dean of Students office, we've done like 155 wellness checks, for example. So we're just shifting the process by which we do it. And the police are contacting us when they're getting a recall for a wellness check and consulting with us before they go knock on a door. So we're kind of in dialogue together and in beta, as I said.
The only other thing I'll add is the idea here is to get even more preventative to where wellness checks aren't kind of the way that we catch folks. And so Mona and I know Carrie and a whole host of others are involved in trainings and also helping our faculty and other staff understand and our advisors. Hey, if you see certain things, let us know now because we can connect far earlier and potentially engage these folks before it gets to a point where folks are really, really worried about them or they're in crisis. And so this sort of approach, if anybody's familiar with the JED Foundation and shifting to that preventative side of things is really where we're trying to focus a lot of our effort and energy so that students don't find themselves in a crisis situation. So go ahead, Leslie Ann.
I think we can take one more live question for people who are here, and then maybe we start to close out.
It's so much more intimidating now when there's other people in the room. Christina, here comes your mic.
Hi, I'm Christine. I work in student enrichment services, she, her pronouns. So my question is, there have been conversations about like training with NUPD and stuff. And I'm just wondering, like, what does that look like? Because I think about instances like Sandra Bland, who I just want to make sure that the conversation about not racially profiling Black and Brown people aren't just in reference to students, but also as like a staff member, is our role, is our like lives in that discussion as well.
Yeah, but my understanding is in speaking both with folks at the senior level, when we start talking about whether it's de-escalation or other kinds of training, right? Where you talk about equity, inclusion, social justice training, not just for police, but for the full community, that we're focusing on the full community. So it's not just centering students. I think our students were the loudest call for sure. And so you hear a lot of narrative around their voices, but CSAB is made up of students, faculty, staff, advisors. And so they're trying to center the full community in that. So any training, whether it be the training for senior leaders, this next 250 that's come out, any of the stuff that organizational development's putting together, anything that will come into play with safety and security and the ongoing training of police, would center that for the full community. So, but I will say this, I think it's a great question for us to explore because what happens to our staff impacts our students as well. And we get back to our own work around organizational development and our own well-being. And that's critically important for us as a division too. So thanks for bringing that up, Christina. Oh, and Leslie Ann just went like this. And I think that means I am now done for the moment. I told you I'd stay. But I do want to bring us to a close here again, just saying thank you. Also want to remind everybody, the Black House is reopening. Lots of people have been working on that. Want to give special gratitude to Dab Velasquez Phillips and her team over in Campus Inclusion and Community, and Leslie Ann Brown Henderson for her leadership through this process. That is Friday, October 15th at 3:30 p.m. at the Black House. So if you can come, please come. We would love to see you there. Gratitude for everybody who helped bring this event to life. Jill Norton and Tori Tomasello, thank you so much for your skills around marketing and photography and all great things here. My friends back in Norris again, see if I get this right. Nate, Chris, and Aaron, and Philip, and Coretta, and Melinda, who helped with all the different things, whether it be technology or space or all of the different, I can't even come up with a word right now. Logistics, that's a word. That is a word today. Yeah. And speaking of logistics, the vice president's staff, Ronnie, Regan, Brianna, Leslie Ann, you are the ones that really make all this work. So thank you so much. Saeed, thank you so much again for that generous and grounding land acknowledgement. Salt, thanks for being in the space to take some of these questions. And again, in closing, sincerest gratitude to all of you in this space and all of you here virtually. I really think this is a time for a very hopeful and hope-filled year. And I'm so glad to be doing it with all of you. So thank you so much.